Hi guys, it's so good to have you back here at CRYPTID'S Den, really. It means the world that you choose to spend a bit of your time with me. I hope your day's been kind, and if not, I'm glad we get this little moment together. And let me know where you're watching from. I always look forward to hearing from you. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and share a thought in the comments. You're part of what makes this space special. Now let's get into it. I didn't scream when I saw her. She was crouched in the far corner of the abandoned cabin, fur matted with blood, arms wrapped protectively around a whimpering child, her eyes wild with fear. But there was no rage in her, no threat, only pain, the same kind I carried. I was 5 months pregnant, my hand still shaking on the steering wheel from what I'd just escaped. I didn't know where I was going. Only that I had to get away. And when my car died in the middle of Cranesfoot Hollow, I thought it was the end. But that night, inside that broken shelter, I found someone else who was also running, also bleeding, also a mother. She didn't speak, neither did I. But somehow, we understood each other. She brought me warmth and berries. I cleaned her wounds. She watched over me as I slept. I kept her child safe when she couldn't move. And in the silence, something grew between us. Something wordless, ancient and true. They'll call it impossible. They'll call her a monster. But she was my sanctuary. And when the real danger came, not from her, but from what hunted both of us, we chose to protect, not to hide. We were rent, human and beast. We were mothers, and we healed in a place no map dares to mark. I don't remember the exact moment the blood dried on my cheek, just that it clung there like a second skin. The left side of my face was swelling, hot with pain, while the steering wheel trembled beneath my hands. Not from the road, from me. From me. There was a sound inside me that wouldn't stop. Not words, just the thud of a heart not entirely my own. 5 months along and I could feel it, soft and steady beneath my ribs, still unaware of what I'd done to keep it alive. I'd driven all night, lights off, windows down, like that might make me invisible. Tennessee roads twist like a memory you can't quite shake. The kind that keeps pulling you back, no matter how many miles you put between then and now. The last gas station I passed was 3 hours behind me. The last time my phone had a signal. Longer than that. The rain had started around midnight. A slow drizzle at first. Then it thickened, turned sharp, cold. Like knives falling sideways through the trees. I didn't care. Cold meant I was still awake, still alive, still moving forward. Until the engine coughed once, then again, and then nothing. I slammed my fist against the dash, tried the key, once, twice. It choked and died, just like that. There was no point screaming, no one out there to hear it. So I grabbed my pack, shoved the door open, and stepped out into the dark. The forest didn't welcome me, it just opened its mouth and swallowed me whole. Mud sucked at my boots. Wind hissed through the canopy like it was warning me to turn back. The trees didn't bend. They loomed. Every branch sharp like bone. Every shadow moved when I blinked. I walked anyway. Couldn't feel my fingers. My coat was soaked through. Each breath I took felt smaller than the last. Not enough air. Not enough warmth. I kept walking. One step. Then another. And then I saw it. A cabin, or what was left of one, tilted slightly on its foundation, windows fogged with years of rain and moss. The porch sagged under the weight of rot and silence. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades, but it had a roof and 4 walls. And right now, that was enough. I forced the door open. It groaned like something waking up. The smell hit me first. Wet wood, rust, old ashes. Maybe animal musk, the kind of scent that clings to the inside of your nose. I stepped in, one step, then another. I didn't see it right away. I was too focused on the dark, on the silence, on the way the floor shifted under me. But then, something moved. Not a noise. Not a sudden lunge. Just the shift of breath in a space I thought was empty. I turned. My throat closed. She was already there. In the far corner, half in shadow, curled around something smaller, massive, covered in thick, matted fur dark as tree bark. Her eyes caught the faint light like wet stones. Wide, bloodshot, but locked on mine. She didn't growl, didn't bare her teeth, just looked. And I couldn't move. There were no thoughts in my head, just cold, just the beat of my heart and the one inside me. Just the way her arms held that smaller body, like it meant everything. I knew what I was seeing, but my brain wouldn't say the word. It didn't want to believe. It didn't want this to be real. She pulled her young one closer, pressed its face to her chest. A soft, whimpering sound came from the little one, muffled by her thick fur. Her body shuddered, but she didn't run. Neither did I. We just stared. Two mothers, both shaking, both out of breath, both bleeding in ways the other couldn't see. She didn't charge. I didn't scream. I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow. Like if I sat down, I'd never stand back up. So I did. Right there on the floor. I slid down the wall and let the rain drip from my clothes into the wood beneath me. My whole body was trembling. My back ached. My feet were soaked. I wanted to sleep for 100 years, but I didn't dare close my eyes. She was still watching me. That strange, wounded calm. The little one peeked up, blinked, then tucked itself deeper under her arm. I whispered barely loud enough to hear myself. "I'm not here to hurt you." She blinked once. Nothing else. I curled tighter, pulled my knees to my chest. The damp crept into my bones. But the longer I sat there, the more the terror started to dull. Just enough for something else to slip in. Not safety. Not exactly. But something quieter. She didn't want me dead, and I didn't want to be alone. Somewhere deep in the cabin, rainwater dripped through a crack in the ceiling. The wind outside rattled a shutter, and every so often, I could hear the fireless hearth give a soft creak, like an old lung still remembering how to breathe. I don't know how long we sat like that. Me on one side of the room, her on the other. Neither of us willing to move first. My eyes got heavy. So did hers. Eventually, something gave out. Not trust, not understanding, just exhaustion. She lay her head down, her arms still wrapped around her child, and I let my head fall back against the wall. 2 breaths, 2 heartbeats. One last glance across a dark, broken cabin. And then, sleep. Not because I was safe, but because I had nowhere left to run. And neither did she. I woke up to the sound of rain still dripping through the roof. Cold light pressed through a cracked window, and for a second, I didn't remember where I was. Then I did. The ache in my back, the damp wood against my spine, and the silence. I turned my head, slow, careful. She was still there. So was the child, curled against her chest like a knot of shadow and breath. I didn't move. Neither did she. Her eyes were open, watching, but not with fear. Not with rage, just, I don't know why I whispered it. Maybe because I had nothing else left to offer. Mourning. Her brow didn't twitch. Her shoulders stayed hunched around her young one. But I swear, there was something different in the air, like the silence between us had softened overnight. Not melted, not cracked, just softened. I sat up slowly, trying not to make sudden sounds. My body felt like it had been run over. My muscles ached from cold and tension. My hands were stiff. Every bone in me wanted to lie back down and disappear. But my stomach had other plans. The growl it made was loud enough to startle even me. Still nothing. But her eyes dropped, not toward my face, toward my belly. She stared at it, at the slight curve under my shirt. 5 months, not enough to be obvious from across the street. But here, in the same room, inches above a floor we both slept on, it was unmistakable. She didn't blink, just stared, and then her eyes dropped lower, to the spot on my coat where blood had dried, rust-brown and crusted stiff. She looked up again, right at me. And in that moment, I felt like I wasn't being watched. I was being read. She saw me, saw the pain behind the bruises, saw the terror under the silence, and she didn't look away. I stayed where I was, didn't reach for anything, didn't try to speak again. She shifted slightly, just enough to push her child behind her leg. Not in fear, not to hide it, but to shield it. A mother's reflex, the same one I'd felt every time I'd flinched at a slammed door. Every time I'd pressed my hands over my stomach and begged whatever was growing inside me to just hold on, just a little longer. The child made a small chirping sound, like a sleepy yawn. She hushed it with a low, rumbling hum. Barely audible, almost like thunder from far away. That's when I saw it. Her leg. There was a tear running down the fur at her thigh. Dark, dried blood clotted thick around it. Her fur stuck together in painful mats. I had noticed the night before. I had been too scared, too cold, but now, in the soft gray light, the wound looked angry, deep. I felt something twist in me. Not pity, recognition. We were both broken things, limping through the world with more wounds than warmth. I can help, I said, my voice barely more than breath. She didn't respond, just watched. I reached slowly into my bag. She tensed. Barely, but enough to see her shoulders rise. I froze. She didn't move. I pulled out a small cloth and a tiny bottle of rubbing alcohol. The bottle only had a little left, but it was something. I used to work in a clinic. Before everything, I said quietly, like talking to the rain more than her. No reaction. I crawled forward on hands and knees, stopping a few feet away, close enough to see the wound better now. The gash looked at least 6 inches long, jagged. Possibly from a trap or a sharp rock. I waited. She didn't lunge. Didn't run. Didn't do anything but keep her eyes on mine. I dipped the cloth in the alcohol, wrung it gently, then held it out toward her. My hand shook. She didn't flinch. Then, slowly, so slowly I thought I imagined it, she shifted, uncurled her leg, pushed the child gently behind her, and placed her wounded leg in front of me. She didn't look at the cloth. She looked at me, right through me, like she knew. This wasn't about bandages. This was about something much harder. She was trusting me, not because I'd earned it, but because she had no choice. Just like I hadn't. I cleaned the wound. Bit by bit, the smell of dried blood, wet fur, and alcohol filled the cabin. She didn't growl, didn't hiss, but I saw her flinch once. Barely. I whispered, "Sorry." She closed her eyes for a second, as if that was answer enough. When I finished, I wrapped the cloth tightly around the wound. Not a perfect job, but better than nothing. I sat back. My hands were shaking worse now. The adrenaline had nowhere left to go. She pulled her leg back, looked at the bandage, then looked at me. And for the first time since I walked into that cabin, something changed in her expression. The hardness in her jaw faded. The muscles in her brow softened. She looked tired. So tired. I get it. I leaned back against the wall again. My shoulders ached from hunching. My throat was dry. We sat like that, the rain still tapping the roof, the wind rattling a shutter somewhere on the side. And in that impossible silence, between two creatures who had no business understanding each other, I felt something settle. Not peace. Not yet, but something close. Something like mercy. I didn't even notice when my head dipped forward again. The fatigue in my bones was stronger than the fear now. But just before my eyes closed, I looked at her one more time. She was watching me, but not as prey, not as threat. Her child nestled back into her chest, and I swore right before I drifted off. I saw her eyes close too. The third night, I stopped being afraid of the silence. That was the first change. It didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of breath, of presence, of something ancient and watchful, but no longer hostile. I'd begun to learn the way her steps sounded. Heavy, deliberate, padded like a bear, but slower. Like she carried every step through her bones. And I'd come to know the way her child's tiny hands made soft, thumping sounds on the floor as it explored. The way it giggled. Yes, giggled. When it found a dry spot of moss tucked under a crack in the floorboards. I don't know if they trusted me yet, but they didn't hide anymore. That felt like something. I tried not to take up space, even though my body ached for it. The cabin was already cramped with age and shadow, and the strange rhythm we'd built without words. I found myself moving slower, softer, learning their pace. I'd boil what little water I could collect from rain runoff, break apart the stale granola bars in my pack to stretch them between us. But it was Mako who started bringing me food. That's what I'd begun calling her in my head. Mako. The name came to me one morning when she dropped a small bundle near my feet. Inside was a cluster of wild roots, some bitter berries, and what looked like a fistful of edible fern tips still wet with dew. I didn't say thank you. I didn't have to. We'd passed the point of needing certain words, but I did whisper the name later that night, as I lay curled on the floor near the hearth that still wouldn't light. Just the name, gently, like breath, Mako. She didn't flinch when I said it, didn't acknowledge it either. But the next morning, the bundle of food was closer, almost touching my boots. Her child was getting bolder too. It would crawl a little closer each time I sat still, sniff at my pack, tug gently at my coat. Once it reached for my stomach. I didn't move. I just let it rest its hand there. Its palm was wide and leathery, fingers long but delicate. It pressed gently. Then it leaned in, ear against me, listening. It did that more than once. I started talking to it softly, in whispers I didn't know I still had in me. Stories I'd never had the chance to tell. I spoke of little things, warm baths, summer grass, the way my dad used to hum when he washed dishes. I told it about the baby I was carrying. I said I didn't know if it was a boy or girl, but I hoped they'd like trees. The baby, Mako's baby, would blink up at me, tilting its head like it was trying to understand. Maybe it did. Maybe it understood more than I ever had. I don't know what day it was when the fever hit. It started with a chill I couldn't shake. My skin felt too tight, my bones too heavy. I remember thinking I just needed rest, but by nightfall, I was shivering so hard my teeth clacked together. I curled up on the floor, dizzy, cold, soaked in sweat that felt like ice. I tried to sit up, tried to find my bag, reach for something, anything. Then everything went sideways. I remember shadows. I remember fur. I remember something warm pressing against my lips. Mako. I didn't see her face clearly, just the heat of her palm on my forehead, the way her arm cradled behind my shoulders, the sharp, wild scent of her, earth and pine and blood. She gave me water, held a leaf like a cup, tilted it carefully, steady hands despite the size. She kept brushing my hair away from my face, over and over, like she thought it might help. I was barely conscious, fading in and out. But I remember that. And then warmth. I don't know where she got it, but she draped something heavy over me, A hide, rough, torn. Smelled like old smoke and wet fur. I was warm. She tucked it around me like a mother would, like no one had done for me in years. I don't know how long I slept. A day? 2? Maybe more. Time stretched thin inside that cabin. There were no clocks, no alarms. Just rain, wind, breath. When I finally opened my eyes again, the light was different. The window was fogged over. The shadows had moved. I was alive. Barely, but alive. My mouth was dry. My limbs were weak. My heart beat slow but steady. And Mako, she was there, curled in the far corner, one eye half open, still watching. Not because she was afraid of me. Because she wasn't. I sat up. Every muscle protested. But I had to look at her. Had to really look. And when I did, I died. Not because of the pain. Not even because of the fever breaking. But because for the first time in my life, someone had stayed. Not out of duty. Not out of fear. But because they chose to. She Shev left me. But she did. She nursed me like I was one of her own. She gave me the last of her water, her warmth, her strength. And all I had to give her was the truth. So I crawled, slow and clumsy, over to the spot where I'd left a piece of cloth from my back. I tore it, folded it, took one of the roots she'd given me and wrapped it inside. Then I slid it toward her. She looked at it, then at me. Then she nodded. No words, just that, but I swear it shook something loose inside me. I don't know what we were. Two strangers trapped in a storm of a world that never asked for us to meet. But somehow, through dirt and blood and silence, we found each other. And in that wreck of a cabin, surrounded by decay and wind and stories too old to speak, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safe. Not because I was healed, but because I wasn't alone anymore. And neither was she. It started to feel like a rhythm. Not quite a life, but a rhythm. The kind you settle into without realizing. The way one breath follows another. The way dusk slips in before you think to light a fire. Not that we had fire. Just the hush of things softening into night, again and again. I'd talk to her sometimes. Mako. I didn't expect answers. I just needed sound. I'd sit cross-legged on the floor near the broken hearth and speak out loud about things that didn't matter and things that did. The color of my childhood bedroom. The way my mother's perfume clung to old coats. How the first time I felt the baby kick. I was brushing my teeth and dropped the toothbrush right into the sink. Mako never answered. Not in the way people do. But her eyes would shift toward me in the dark. Her brow would soften. Some nights she would inch a little closer. Not enough to touch, but enough that I could feel her warmth at my side like a low-burning stove. And somehow, in that silence, we became something more than strangers. Her child had no fear of me anymore. It left tiny offerings, berries, curled leaves, stones that looked polished by time. Every morning, there'd be something new by my boots. As if it had watched, understood, decided I deserved a place here too. There was a moment, small, quiet, that I'll never forget. I had gone to the stream that wound like a silver thread through the trees just beyond the cabin. I'd gone to wash my hands, maybe clear my head. But my balance was off. Pregnancy shifts you in strange ways. My foot slipped on the wet bank. My knee hit the mud hard, and for a breath I couldn't move. Then suddenly, there she was, Mako. No sound, no growl, just a large, steady hand under my arm. Not yanking, not dragging, helping. She lifted me like I weighed nothing. But it was more than the gesture. It was the look, not pity, not concern, recognition. I was her equal now, not in strength, but in the quiet knowing that we both bore weight no one else could see. That night, when we returned to the cabin, I took the chain from around my neck. It had been my mother's, a simple silver pendant worn smooth from years of wear. I didn't have much, but this I could give. I held it out, palm open. No words. Mako reached with her fingers, thick, fur-covered, and calloused with time, and took it as gently as if it were glass. She turned it over in her hand, eyes narrowing, not in suspicion but reverence. She tucked it into the fur near her chest, kept it close. That's when I knew she saw me, not as a burden, not even as a guest, but as someone who belonged. Days passed like clouds, slow and strange, edged with color but hard to hold on to. We began fixing the place up together in our own way. I'd gather moss and old rags to plug the gaps in the walls. She stacked stones in a new corner, made a small shelf out of bark and bone to dry herbs. We didn't speak the same language, but we understood the work. The shape of living. Then one morning, everything shifted. I stepped outside before dawn to collect wood. The air had that stillness, heavy, like the forest was holding its breath. And there it was, a footprint, bigger than Mako's, deeper, clawed. It pressed into the damp earth near the edge of the clearing, not hours old. I crouched beside it. My heart jumped to my throat. This one wasn't hers. And it wasn't a mistake. Whoever left it wanted to be seen. I walked back to the cabin slower than usual. My ears scanned the woods. The birds weren't singing. The wind had gone quiet. Inside, Mako stood near the door. She didn't ask what I saw. Didn't need to. She'd already felt it. Her shoulders were set, her jaw tight. The child clung to her side. And for the first time since that night I stumbled through the rain, I saw something new in her eyes. Fear. Not the panic of prey, but the dread of a mother who's run out of places to hide. She didn't bolt, didn't shrink. She stepped forward and stood in front of me, between me and the open door, between me and whatever was out there. It wasn't instinct, it was choice. My chest ached in that strange, sharp way you only feel when someone does something you know you don't deserve. My hand hovered in the air. I didn't touch her. I didn't have to. She knew. And just like that, we stood there, unmoving. Two women, two mothers, two pieces of the same quiet grief, ready to face whatever came next. The wind picked up again, gently. Somewhere far off, a bird cried, but I couldn't hear the forest anymore. Not the way I had before. Now all I heard was the sound of my own breath. And hers, steady beside me, like thunder rolling slow behind the trees. We didn't talk about the footprint. Not with words, but it hung in the air like fog that never burned off. Heavy, close. Every breath had to move around it. Mako started checking the tree line more often. She'd stand at the cabin's edge, nose tilted slightly, shoulders taut, eyes scanning like she already knew what direction it might come from. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I knew that feeling too well, when danger doesn't knock, just waits, polite and patient, until you're too tired to run. Still, we moved through the days, maybe not in peace, but in effort, in rhythm, in choice. We began to build something together, not just survival, structure. We'd found old boards out back, nearly rotted but still solid enough if braced right. I used the blunt side of a rusted hatchet to hammer them into the frame of the cabin wall. Mako, with surprising precision, stacked stones into what I could only describe as a fire pit. Not for heat, there still wasn't fire, but for cooking. We dug a shallow trench to redirect runoff. She gathered leaves and bark to line a spot near the back wall for her child. I strung a line with scraps of fabric to hang what little we washed. It wasn't beautiful, but it was ours. We didn't talk. But the work spoke for us. That night I carved something from a piece of wood I'd found near the stream. A ring. It wasn't perfect. The shape was uneven, the edges rough, but I'd shaped it with care. Shaved it smooth with the broken blade from my old pocket knife. Polished it with the inside of my sleeve. I didn't know why I made it. Not at first. Maybe I just needed to make something with my hands that wasn't born from pain. When I held it out to Mako, sitting cross-legged near the wall, child sleeping in her lap, she stared at it for a long moment. Didn't take it right away. Her eyes flicked between my hand and my face, trying to read the meaning. Eventually, she reached out, and I placed it gently into her palm. She turned it slowly between two thick fingers. Then, without a sound, she slipped it onto one clawed digit and held it there like it mattered. She stood, walked past me, returned a moment later with something in her hand. A small, smooth stone, gray-blue, with a pale vein running through it like lightning. She pressed it into my palm and closed my fingers around it. I turned it over and saw the marking, a groove cut deep, 3 curved lines pressed into the center, made by something sharp and deliberate. It wasn't just a stone. It was something sacred, and I had no words for it. That night, I slept with the stone under my pillow. The next morning, we found the hatch. It was almost comical. I'd been cleaning near the back wall, clearing out a pile of collapsed shelves, when one of the floorboards shifted under my knee. I leaned closer, knocked, hollow. I looked at Mako. She stepped closer. We shared one long glance, like two kids about to open a time capsule in a wrong graveyard. I pried the board up. Dust swirled up in lazy spirals. A dark space gaped beneath, not deep, maybe 3 feet. But what was inside? A blanket. Thin, olive green, military grade. A tin canteen, long empty, rusted, a book. I pulled it out. The cover had peeled away long ago, but inside the pages were still legible. Water damaged, warped, but intact. I turned to the first page. She saved me. 1979. Just 5 words. Scratched into the top corner in block letters. The rest of the book. Notes, maps, drawings, sketches of plants. A rough floor plan of the cabin. Doodles of a towering figure, sometimes with a smaller one beside it. Pages and pages of handwritten scrawl. And on one page, smudged, almost invisible, a handprint. Not ink, just dirt, maybe mud, human-sized, and next to it, a second print. Rita, thicker fingers, a palm that told stories in silence. I ran my fingers along the edge of the page and looked up at Mako. She didn't need to explain. She had saved someone before. More than once, maybe. And this wasn't her first time protecting the broken. I should felt betrayed in some strange, twisted way. Like I wasn't special. Like I wasn't the first. But I didn't. I felt relief, because it meant this was real. Not some fever-dreamed fantasy in the woods. Not trauma masking itself as myth. She had done this before, and she had survived. I sat back against the wall, heart thudding. The child stirred in its sleep. Mako knelt beside it, covering its shoulders with a frayed patch of hide. I held the journal in my lap and whispered, mostly to myself, "She's not a monster." The words barely left my lips, but I knew she heard, because she looked up. And for the first time since I met her, Mako didn't just acknowledge me with her eyes. She nodded. Just once, slow, like a truth had passed between us that didn't need a language. That night, the wind rattled the cabin less. The rain, when it came, was gentle. And even though the woods still held their secrets, we were no longer running from them. We were building something within them, something fragile, something fierce, something that might even survive. And slowly, that weight behind my ribs. A quiet pressure building. The kind that comes when comfort starts to feel dangerous. When peace starts to feel temporary. I'd been living between heartbeats, surviving one day to the next, not asking questions about what came after. But the question was coming from me now, louder every morning. What happens when the baby comes? What happens when I can't hide anymore? The cabin had become something like home, a stitched-together haven of moss and bone, of leaf-wrapped roots and quiet hands. I could breathe here, not deeply, but better than I had in years. I knew the sound of Mako's footsteps, the rhythm of her sleep. Her child clung to my legs when I sat still too long, giggled when I yawned, tried to braid the ends of my hair with bits of grass. I smiled without forcing it now, but under that smile, the question stayed. I wasn't supposed to stay. And yet, I couldn't leave, not without tearing something vital out of myself. I was folding strips of bark one afternoon, trying to patch the roof before the next rain, when Mako appeared at the edge of the clearing. She didn't move the way she usually did. No pause, no glance at the tree line. Just purpose. She gestured with one massive hand. Simple, clear. Follow me. I dropped the bark, wiped the sap from my fingers, and went. We didn't speak. Didn't have to. She led me deeper than I'd ever dared go, past the place where the trees grew close together, where the sky barely cut through. My breath caught a few times. Not from fear, but from the quiet. It was the kind of silence that made your blood feel louder. Then the trees opened, and there it was, a cave. Not large, but carved into the rock, like it had always been there. Its mouth hidden behind a tangle of hanging moss. I ducked under and stepped inside. It was cool, the air damp and still. My eyes adjusted slowly, but I could already see the walls, carved, painted, marked in ways that made the hair on my arms stand up. Shapes, symbols, handprints, dozens of them, some large, some tiny. And in the center, set just above eye level, two prints side by side. One human, one not. My breath hitched. I reached up, placed my hand where the human print had once been pressed. Mako stood behind me. I could feel her watching. I didn't speak. My palm fit the old mark almost exactly. I turned. Her eyes weren't hard now. They were soft in a way I'd never seen, like something in her was remembering. She stepped forward, knelt, and with one long finger she pointed to the mark beside mine, then to her child, then to my belly. I understood. Not with words, with blood, with history. She was showing me what could be, not what I owed, what I could choose. And for the first time in my life, choice didn't feel like a burden. It felt like breath. We stayed there a long while, just standing in the quiet. My hand still on the wall, hers still beside her child. No time, no fear, just a knowing that stretched back generations. Then a sound, low, distant, but wrong. It wasn't wind. It wasn't rain. It was a howl, sharp, long, tearing. Mako went still, then she rose, slow but alert. I followed her outside. The trees swayed like they'd heard it too. The air had changed. The weight was different. The forest knew something was coming. Another sound. Closer. Heavy footfalls. Not hers. Not mine. She shoved her child toward me with both hands, gestured toward the cave. I hesitated. She growled low. Not at me, but at the trees. A warning. Not to the thing out there. To me. Go. I grabbed the child, ran into the cave, curled around it near the back, arms wrapped tight. One hand instinctively over my stomach. I heard her move away. Branches cracked. The air tensed. I held my breath. Outside, The growls rose. 2 voices now. One I didn't. One I knew. One I did. The second was deeper, rougher, violent. Then, silence. The kind that comes before something breaks. I wanted to run, wanted to scream. But I didn't. I stayed, held her child to my chest like it was my own. And then I moved. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the sound of her struggling. Maybe it was the way my baby kicked against my ribs. Or maybe I just couldn't sit still while someone else fought for me. I rose, stepped toward the mouth of the cave. Stopped just short and saw them. Mako and a male, taller, broader, eyes like wildfire. They were circling each other. He was snarling, wild with challenge. She was calm, deadly calm. But I saw her eyes. She was bleeding. She was tired. She was trying to lead him away. I knew that look. I'd worn it before, back in a hallway, behind a locked door, back when I told myself if I just took the hit, it might end there. I couldn't let her do it alone. I stepped out. She turned, just enough to see me, and her face changed. Not with fear, with pain, a silent plea, go back. But I didn't. I stepped closer, and for the first time since I'd arrived in those woods, I wasn't the one being protected. I was choosing to stay, to fight, to be there when it counted. The male paused, saw me, took a step back, confused. Mako lunged then, not to kill, but to drive him toward the trees, and it worked. He turned, fled, vanished. She staggered. I ran to her, reached out. She didn't stop me, and that silence between us, always filled with breath and warning, held something new now, a vow. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. I didn't see the man. I heard him first. The way twigs snapped beneath boots. The rhythm of someone trying to move quietly through a place that doesn't like secrets. The forest warned us. Mako tensed before the sound even reached my ears. She pulled her child to her side. I backed toward the cabin, slow, steady, my hand instinctively resting on the swell of my stomach like I could shield what hadn't yet been born from what might already be watching. His name was Luke Bennett. I wouldn't know that until later. Back then, all I saw was the silhouette of a man with a rifle, cutting through the trees like he owned them. Flannel shirt, orange cap. Looked like every other hunter I'd ever seen growing up, except this one wasn't dragging deer scent or looking for a buck. He was following tracks. Ours. I should vow. I didn't. Neither did Mako. She stood tall, unmoving, between me and the man, between her child and whatever came next. Luke stopped when he saw her. Didn't raise the gun. Not yet. Just froze like the trees had swallowed him whole. I saw the way his eyes scanned her body. Furred, broad, still bleeding slightly from the last fight. Then his eyes darted to me, to the baby at her side, to the shape of my belly. He wasn't sure what he was looking at. His hands twitched. I took a step forward. He flinched. I raised both arms, slow, palms up. "Don't," I said, voice shaking. "She's not what you think." He blinked like the sentence didn't compute, like it had landed in the wrong world. I saw the confusion on his face harden into something sharper. Fear. He lifted the rifle, and that's when the cave started to sing, not from the outside, from within. A sound, low and trembling, not quite words, a lullaby. It wasn't Mako. It wasn't me. It was the echo of something left behind, something sacred. I'd never heard it before, but Mako had, because her eyes didn't turn toward the rifle. They turned toward the cave. Luke's arms dropped slightly, just an inch, but I saw it. Saw the doubt press into his bones. His finger hovered over the trigger like it had lost its orders. Then he stepped back. One step. Another. He turned and ran. We didn't speak. We stood in the clearing as the sound faded, as the trees folded in behind him like they'd never opened. I didn't know what would happen next. But Mako did. That evening, As the sun fell behind the ridge, we walked together. Her, the child, and me, to the edge of the clearing. I carried a scrap of wood. Mako carried a small rock. Together we pressed them into the base of an old tree. I carved words into the wood with the edge of a broken tin lid. She placed the stone beside it, not to warn. To tell the truth, we were hurt. We were found. We chose peace. The next morning, they were still there. The morning after that, too. But I noticed something new. No birds chirping near the trail. No deer tracks. And then the stories began. I never saw Luke again, but others came. Students, hikers, whisperers. They came with flashlights and notebooks and questions that didn't have answers. They stayed to the edges. They never crossed the line. Something in the woods had changed. The place wasn't angry. It was waiting. It was waiting. I started hearing voices in the dark. Not cruel. Not threatening. Just wondering. And one day, tucked between two roots near the cave mouth, someone left a gift. Clean pine needles wrapped around a piece of chocolate. A trade. A gesture. A question. Are you still there? We didn't answer. Not directly. But the next morning, that chocolate was gone, and a small, perfect acorn sat in its place. I don't know what the man told people. I don't know if he ever said my name, but he never came back. And the cabin, our cabin, stayed untouched. And when the wind moved just right at night, when the baby inside me kicked like it wanted to listen, I swore I could still hear the song, not with my ears, with whatever part of me had been remade by silence and blood and mercy. That lullaby was never meant for outsiders. It was meant for those who stayed, for those who listened. They say the land closed after we left. That Crane's Foot Hollow became off-limits. Posted signs nailed into trees. A warning from the state. No trespassing due to unstable ground, but the ground never shook for us. The trees never fell. The danger wasn't in the roots. It was in the silence people refused to hear. We weren't driven out. We chose when to go. Mako led us to the ridge just before dawn. The air was gold-edged and still. The kind of quiet that carries weight without fear. Her child, our child, really by then, walked between us with a pine cone in one hand and the silver chain from my mother hanging loose around its wrist. The leaves crunched soft beneath our feet. I knew every sound, every breath of that trail. And yet that morning felt different. Like it knew. She stopped just beyond the birch line. The place where the world thinned. The place where I could have turned left and found asphalt in under an hour. I stood beside her. We didn't touch, but we didn't need to. Her hand lifted slowly, rested on my belly, now heavy with life. She didn't look at me. She looked beyond, into the trees, into time. And then she turned, melted back into the woods without a sound. The child hesitated, looked at me, then at her, then at me again. I nodded. It didn't cry. It didn't run. It just followed, and that was the last I saw of them, but not the last I felt. Not by a long shot. Years passed. I raised my daughter with that same hush in her lungs. She laughed like the forest. Not loud, not sharp, but rich, like something deep calling out from far off. We moved west. Found a little place tucked near the timberline where the sky stretched big and the neighbors kept to themselves. I told her bedtime stories about the rain, about creatures who didn't need words to speak, about how the deepest kinds of love don't shout. They stay. And sometimes she'd wake before sunrise, pad barefoot to the window, and say she thought she heard laughing in the wind. When she was 5, we returned. Just once. I told her it was a hike. Just a memory trail. But I brought something. A bundle of clean roots, tied tight with a braided cord of my hair. We left it on the cabin steps. The next morning, it was gone. In its place, wrapped in dew-wet leaves, was a single perfect berry. She smiled when she saw it, said, "Mama, the woods remember us." I didn't answer. I couldn't. There's a girl who got lost in those trees a few years back. She was found the next day, safe, no scratch, no bruise. She told the rescue team 2 women had walked her to the river, one with curly hair, one covered in fur. They said not to believe her, said the woods play tricks on frightened minds. But I knew. I always knew. And every so often, someone leaves an offering on the trail, and every so often, they find something in return. A smooth stone, a ring of bark, a perfect braid of moss. Not answers, just reminders that mercy doesn't always speak the way we expect, and that love, the real kind, often wears the strangest faces. Sometimes I still dream of her. Not the fear, not the blood, but the silence, the safety, the fire that never needed to be lit because what we carried between us was already warm enough. And when the wind moves just right, I swear, you can still hear 2 mothers laugh. Sometimes, the most extraordinary stories don't begin with a scream in the night or a flash of light in the woods. They start quietly. On a road no one remembers, with a wound no one sees. And sometimes they end not with a battle, but with a hand reaching back. What you've just heard isn't a tale about monsters or myths. It's about the spaces in between fear and understanding, between survival and trust. It's about what happens when 2 different worlds collide, not to destroy each other, but to protect something neither can name. This story isn't really about the unknown. It's about how we treat what we don't understand. About how sometimes the ones we're taught to fear are the very ones who teach us how to stay soft in a world that keeps trying to harden us. Because there are places not found on maps. They live in memory, in gesture, in silence. In the look between 2 souls who will never speak the same language, but will carry the same weight. And in the end, it isn't the blood we share that makes a family. It's the choices. The ones made in the dark, when no one is watching. The ones that say, "I see you. I won't leave you behind." We carry pieces of these stories long after they end. In the way we listen to the wind, in the way we trust the quiet, in the way we leave something small behind. Just in case someone out there is still listening too. So if this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of what it means to be seen, to be held, to be forgiven, then don't let that feeling slip away. Let it echo. Leave us a comment. Share what stayed with you. What made you pause? What made you hope? And if you haven't yet, follow the channel. Subscribe. Be part of this quiet corner where the strange becomes sacred and the forgotten becomes family. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we remember. And sometimes, that's how healing begins.